you have this insane concept now that's been created by Facebook, which, interestingly, Facebook takes no responsibility for this because they have outsourced fact checking to so-called independent fact checkers, which essentially means that Facebook is not making itself liable to its own fact checkers. If Facebook had, the Facebook verification police unit that went around as employees of Facebook and checked things, then they could be liable for saying things are untrue when they're not. But they don't put themselves in that position. They have these essentially George Soros funded Democratic operatives. The group Lead Stories that keeps fact checking my mask videos is run by a couple of former DNC operatives and former CNN staffers who are getting paid by Facebook and getting paid by Soros groups to essentially go through Facebook and to declare by fiat anything they disagree with as being wrong. And that's hugely problematic. And the reason it's so problematic is because obviously if we're talking about, Facebook, if we're talking about these platforms, as I said, so I had my initial story, that was fact checked as being wrong. So then I fact checked their fact check and then presented the second study. And then they came back and fact checked that as being wrong also, right? And the crazy thing is, and I would be happy to read to you the first paragraph of what they wrote, because even in their fact check of my fact check of their fact check, they're wrong in the first paragraph, like 5 different times. Statements they make, including saying this is a Russian-funded video. That's not true. That was published by RT. That's not true. We are independently created through my company. We run on Facebook independently, and then RT for free, they pay us nothing, carries those podcasts as well on their YouTube channel. So we're not paid by them, and they don't fund it. They claim that the WHO study is not new, because what definition do you want to use as new? So government study that comes out 60 days ago is not new? What's considered new? 5 minutes? 6 minutes?
Whatever suits their agenda.
Whatever suits their agenda. And what's hilarious about that is they called it not new. But in the previous fact check, they had said that my data was old, and they were fact checking and correcting it with a story and a study from April. Mm-hmm. So they use a standard of saying April is the new information. I give them one in May, and they say that's not new.
What's interesting about this concept of these fact checkers is, number one, they don't check facts. It's really unbelievable. As a journalist, right, if you're going to be fact checking means you look at the content of the claims that are made, the content of the reporting, and you verify whether or not that reporting is accurate, whether or not the studies that are cited are accurate, whether or not the numbers that are used are accurate. You don't go in there and say, well, we're looking for any phraseology or wording that might be misleading. And by the way, they're not even doing that to mine. What they're doing with mine is then suddenly, amazingly, after my report goes out, someone will happen to post on Facebook, and you know how people will post the video and they put like a little frame around it and they put text in that frame. Well, somebody I don't know will take that and they'll put some crazy comment. Like, for instance, a report I did on the Wuhan lab and the fact that multiple scientists were saying that this coronavirus appears to have been really man-made. It appears that it was not natural, did not occur in nature, and has been manipulated, right? And these are multiple virologists around the world who have said this. And what they did was they took that and someone put a frame around it and put the scientists confirm that the coronavirus is a U.S. bioweapon, right? That's never said in the report. That claim or phrase is never cited. However, the report itself is now flagged as misleading or false because they didn't fact check the report. Instead, they fact check what someone else writes as a caption, and then they say, well, therefore this thing is untrue. And so it's ways of getting around actual responsible journalism, because they're not journalists and they're not being responsible. They're there to push a narrative and to remove anyone who dissents from that narrative.
Ben, and I will tell you, it sounds a little crazy. You think that people have the intelligence to decipher information for themselves and pick apart fact from fiction? I mean, how dare you? For those who don't know, I used to write for Ben's website a couple years back and written for a number of independent media websites. And around the time, Ben, that you started to transition to focusing on ICE and a lot of the team was, moving into other projects, mm-hmm. Within that same week, I lost every single writing job I have in the alternative media within 1 week due to Google AdSense funny business of taking down monetization and all that within a week, anti-media, a number of websites that, as you know, a couple years ago were reaching hundreds of thousands of people a day were just gone. And so the ecosystem has greatly shrunk. While there's still tons of content out there, I would say as far as those who are trying to put out hard-hitting, investigative, factual content that people can really count on, that pool has shrank greatly, unfortunately. And so there's a lot of stories that we just simply don't have the bandwidth to keep up with. And part of that problem has been the fact checking. The last website I was writing for was consistently getting fact checked by Facebook fact checkers for the same kind of stuff you're talking about. Semantic arguments. They try to go and find, well, maybe this is true, but then technically, it doesn't explicitly say this. They try to find some way that they can just put that false rating on top and discourage anybody from being able to look into that. And as you know, when you start to look into these fact checkers, many of them come from CNN, come from other mainstream outlets, news leader, story leader. There's Africa Check, Science Feedback, a lot of these really generic names that have popped up that are partnered with Facebook and others. I think this is probably one of the biggest dangers to not only independent media, but to free thought in general. So, anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. One of the things that we have to recognize is that these fact checkers are not fact checkers. They're not. They are paid political pundits in some cases. Many of them have worked for political campaigns in the past. As you mentioned, they work for CNN. But who's giving them the money to do this? You also have to look at that. Where is the funding for these organizations coming from? There's one called Lead Stories. Who's funding Lead Stories, right? And as you said, if you go to the websites, they're horrific-looking websites. There's no money being put into that because that's not what their value is. They are receiving money from groups like the Atlantic Council and Soros, who are backing these groups in order to do nothing but essentially go around looking for stories online that are picking up traction that go against their narrative, and then slurring and slandering. My sister had actually, after one of those fact check pieces about me came out, she started texting me and said, "Have you read this one?" And I said, "I hadn't read it yet because I just know it's all garbage." And she says, "You really should look at this one because they don't ever address your article. The whole thing's about you. It's just basically slandering you." And that's what they're doing, right? Their strategy is to say, we're going to attack you, attack the messenger, and we're going to, as you said, these semantic arguments are used to try to claim everything is false. But at the same time, I think that this process is backfiring for the fact checkers, because I have heard from so many people in the last few weeks who did not think there was a problem before, who suddenly shared something online and they got a message from Facebook, you're sharing misinformation or disinformation, you're sharing something that's possibly harmful to the community. And they're like, it was a meme, right? It wasn't anything. An example of something that was recently taken down and flagged that I had put up, and this was not my own work, it was a picture of a flyer from an Ace Hardware in Michigan when the governor there, Gretchen Whitmer, had put out the mandate saying if businesses allow customers to come in who are not wearing face masks, the business will lose their license. There's an Ace Hardware that put up a flyer, and essentially all they said in it was, the governor has said that you must wear a face mask unless you have a medical condition. If you walk in here without a mask on, we assume it means a medical condition. We will respect your First Amendment and Fourth Amendment rights as well as HIPAA laws, and we won't ask you. That's all it said. Can you fact check that flyer? No, you can't fact check the flyer. If you fact check the flyer, an actual fact check would mean this flyer was not actually in an Ace Hardware. It's fake. It was made by somebody who just put it on the internet. That's a fact check. Instead, because it's a real flyer that was used in a real store and it was getting traction, instead, the fact checkers flagged it as being false. And then when you say, check why, it says HIPAA laws do not prevent you from asking this. And it's like, but that's not the point. The point isn't whether or not they can legally ask you. The point was they're not going to ask you because they disagree with what the governor's done, and this is how they were getting around it. And so when you are constantly, see, that's what I'm trying to say. It's more than just a control of speech. It's more than just a control of whether or not things are true and untrue. It's trying to control the entire thought process. We will control how you think, and we will control what you think and what you're allowed to even come in contact with. And that's what's so dangerous about it.